I've wanted to make this video for a little while and it looks like the weather might be cooperating. So today I'm actually going to take you on a tour of the whole property of Life on Lilac, and we are celebrating our first year of being here. So 1 year ago, on July 5th, our family moved from Texas 1,000 miles north to Indiana, northern Indiana. It's right on the border of Michigan. And we've done a lot. We moved here for ministry purposes. The Lord has really blessed that. But we've also been able to have stewardship over a really neat property. And I'm just gonna show you what we've done since we've been here and possibly a vision for what is coming. So here we go. So this is the entrance. It has these really cool stone walls bordering the entrance and the driveway. We love this. We think it was built right around 1860, about the same time as the house. That was right before the Civil War. And at that time, when people were buying farmland, they would dig out stones from their farmland as they plowed, and they would use those as a perimeter for their property. Now, this property used to be 70 acres, and then he bought some more, and it was like 300. We've done a little research. Right now, it's an acre and a half, and it's just perfect for what we need. But this summer, I put in a row of lavender here, and a row of lavender on the other side. Those gladiolas were actually here, so that I let those stay. And then in front, I just have some proven winners petunias. They make the best petunias. They just go crazy. I just planted these because they were on sale, so we'll see how much we can get out of them before the fall weather hits. Okay, going inside on the south side, it is a jungle, and it's gonna be a jungle for a long time. We're doing little things here and there. For example, look how tiny these are. I put these 3 little spruce saplings in here. Those were just things that I bought for Christmas last year as decoration. And so I planted them, and maybe they'll grow up and they'll be part of our border. But mostly what I've done on this side is kill poison ivy. That's been a major project for the last solid year. We can't do anything about it in the winter, but pretty much spring through the beginning of fall, I can work on killing that poison ivy. There was some back there too. So I just have to stay away from those areas. We've moved some of our irises in here, some of our daylilies. These are just the wild orange daylilies that grow everywhere in Indiana. And then my goal to do as many evergreens as possible to give our neighbors some privacy from us, because we have a lot going on. And then just dot the border with pretty things like hostas. That's a lilac. Heucheras. This is also called coral bell, and they have the most beautiful foliage, and they come back every single year. Wonderful. I planted these because they were $17 last year. I'm pretty sure this is a green giant arborvitae. It'll, at its largest, it'll get like 30 feet wide. So I tried to plant it kind of far from the border here. Everything that was here when we moved in was invasive. So this is Virginia creeper. It takes over poison ivy, red buds. I mean, I love a red bud tree, but they're totally out of control. Honeysuckle is a major issue. So we're just digging up a little bit at a time, pushing back the border and replacing it with things that we like. Look at that. I've never seen that before. It must have just started blooming. So here's a clue to what might have been here on the border a long, long time ago. That is so pretty. We do have wild raspberries. They're kind of done now. Black raspberries. I think I might have a project for these dry ones. You can see that silvery blue stem. Those are all black raspberries. So right next to our yard, right as you go out this little path, we have a city park, and that goes straight down. It's a sledding hill. So this is the top of the sledding hill. We just come right over from home and sled down the hill. So when we were doing research, we noticed that there used to be a barn, and we figured out where the barn was. They had rows of trees right here, right along where the driveway is now, and we're pretty sure it went straight back onto what is now the park's property. And there was a big barn back there. And then lining this row was walnut trees. These are black walnut trees. They're massive. They're 60, 70, 80 feet tall. But this is what we tapped this year for syrup. So you drill a hole into the side. It does not hurt the tree. The sap flows around March and April, and then you boil the sap down to make syrup. Super fun. We don't have maple trees on the property, so that's like the next best thing. The only downside to these amazing, massive trees is that they produce a chemical in their roots that actually competes with other plants. So one of the reasons that only invasive species have survived is because anything that's in the perimeter of these plants, these trees right here, is getting poisoned. So we have to do some research, figure out what can grow despite the chemical juglone that these trees produce. One thing we're pretty sure cannot grow is that beautiful noble fir right there. There's 3 noble firs. There's a 4th one trying its best, and then we pulled out 2 or 3 dead ones, and then there's one over there. Notice the perimeter of the tree is where the old ones died, and so we're guessing that noble firs cannot compete with the chemical in the black walnut. So now we're gonna walk up to the front of the property again because I wanna show you guys what's been going on with the front. Donnie scooped out all the dirt along the front of the wall so that it would be a nice clean slate. But then weeds started growing where the clean slate was. So I said, can I grow something here in the time that we're waiting? Because we are eventually going to put some beautiful Douglas firs out here to kind of buffer the noise and give a little privacy. So what we've planted this year is pumpkins and sunflowers. Now you'll notice there are some gaps in the sunflowers. That's because we have deer. We have a family of about 4 deer that come onto the property nightly and decide what they're going to snack on. But there are some really pretty sunflowers in here. And then here are the pumpkins. And because of the deer, I'm using these nursery pots and just putting them right on top of the smaller ones. The bigger ones have to be on their own now. They won't even fit. I woke up one morning and tried to pull the pot off of this big guy, and it almost got stuck. Look how big that is. It's turning bright orange. Gorgeous. Now here's a shot of the front of our house. These are 2 giant hydrangeas. They've been kind of floppy this year. I'm gonna trim them up next year. And we're actually gonna move some of these hydrangeas because what they do is they make baby plants at their roots and they just keep multiplying. I have not done much with this area at all because it's not something that people see when they first get here. They see the other side of the house, which looks a little better. This side is almost completely in shade. Impressive collection. Not my collection. These were here when we moved. Of hostas and ferns. Gorgeous. And then on one side of the house, we had the entire side of the house is lily of the valley too. So this is really sweet in the early spring. They had some hellebores that the neighbors had planted, but they creeped onto our side of the fence. And so I'm gonna keep adding ferns and hostas and hellebores. Look at this spruce. We have no idea how old this spruce is. But this is the one that in a storm last year, the top, what had 2 tops, one of the tops fell right there. And this is like our little fairy area. Looks like it's come under some disrepair. Here, I'll move this. This is a weed that grows like crazy here called pokeberry or pokeweed. Anyway, this is a little birdhouse that we found. So here we are coming around the side, which actually acts as the front porch, the door that we use. That's kind of an Indiana Midwest thing. Nobody really uses the front door. Everybody uses the side door. And since this is facing the south, and I'll show you my vegetable garden coming up in a minute, it's not great. I thought, let's just put tomatoes here since I don't have much space ready in the vegetable garden. So a lot of my job this year has been to cut a new border for planting. And that's what we've been doing, cutting farther and farther out into the yard to plant. But the tomatoes are doing so great. They have been nibbled by critters, so I've come through and put them in bags like this. I think they're doing okay in the bags. I haven't seen a lot of critter damage since that. They were taking the whole green tomato off the vine and taking one bite out of it and then dropping it on the ground because it didn't taste good. And then there are more pumpkin vines growing up here. Just for fun, these are all volunteers from last year's pumpkins and possibly a spaghetti squash. I don't know what this is, some kind of crazy hybrid. We're just gonna use it for decoration in the fall. This is the back porch, and when we first moved here, there was a fence along this entire sidewalk, a white fence. You couldn't see into the backyard. It didn't make sense to us for our lifestyle, so we tore it down. But this deck is definitely on its last leg. We've had lots of critters. If you follow us on Instagram, you've seen the saga of the groundhog. We've actually rehomed 4 groundhogs from this property, 3 this year. So this little building is called the smokehouse. We think it was actually a smokehouse when it was built, which means they would hang meat in here and build a fire, because we're talking pre-refrigeration years. Right now we use it as a garden shed. There we go. But you can still see, so they replaced the roof and there's no hole in the roof, so we can't use it for smoke. But you can still see the hooks. Now, were these the hooks that they used for meat? We're not sure, but we still call this the smokehouse, or sometimes the meat house if we can't remember smokehouse. And it was very weedy around here, but this is such a sweet little building that I thought we need to really take care of this area. Now it's a little mini cottage garden. I had ranunculus, they're done for the season. These are foxglove, delphinium. I'm pretty sure that's a hollyhock. I planted a few seeds back there and I think one of them took. This is the only dahlia I have this year. I had lots of beautiful dahlias that I brought from Texas last year, but I did not do a good job storing them and they did not survive. So the only thing here when we moved where it was weeds and mint. Somebody had planted mint in here, and I will show you an example. I will be pulling mint from this area probably for the rest of my life. I wasn't here. We were out of the country when these bloomed, and I didn't plant these, so I'm pretty sure they're a purple, but I didn't get to see most of them bloom. These are red raspberries that will not stay here, but they were really fun this year to get some raspberries. And I bought them at the end of the season last year for only like $2. So I got lots of raspberries just for fun. So we'll move those somewhere when we figure out where the perfect raspberry spot is. But all these irises were crammed, all the irises on the entire property were crammed on either side of this door. They were just piled on top of each other. And so that was one of the first garden projects I did, was to space those out and move them around. Now when we moved here, this area was almost completely in shade because that fence that I was just telling you about was right here, and it was shading this entire backyard. So this is a rose. It's called At Last. That's a hydrangea that I planted last year. More iris. You'll see iris all over the place because I had so many. There's a different kind of hydrangea. And this is my first year to try a David Austin rose. Now you can see this area, I haven't cut the border yet. This is more what it's gonna look like when the border's cut. So there's just little bits at a time. That's all I can handle. This is a David Austin rose. This is Lady of Shalott, and it's beautiful orangey apricot color. We definitely had some pest damage this year, but we'll figure that out eventually. I had some peonies here. I have another David Austin rose. I haven't been able to see this one bloom yet, but it's called Generous Gardener. This is a hardy hibiscus. When we first moved here last year, well, I guess a few weeks after we moved, because this is the anniversary, there were hibiscus blooms all over town, and Donnie said, "What are those?" They look like they're from Wizard of Oz. So I said, "I'm gonna put some in for you." So that's what those are. This was here, not in this spot. It was on the front wall when we moved in, and this was a new plant to me. I'd never seen bee balm before, but this is a wonderful medicinal plant. You can actually take the petals off and dry them and then use them in a tea. And then we're hoping very soon to start a building project with this garage. We would like to build a 2-story space where guests can come and visit. We already have a little bit of guest space, but we want more. But we're hoping this would be a 2-story thing where you can go upstairs, and that is where you're staying. Fruit trees. I had to purchase these in March, but we couldn't plant them in March, and we couldn't wait until a plantable time to purchase them. So some of these, a couple peaches, were lost, but we have plums, peaches, I think we have a nectarine, a row of cherries, and a row of apples. And until I get everything documented, I have to leave the tags on them because I don't know what's what. So this brings us to a lot of what my job is, to take care of the grounds and to learn from it. So a typical orchard, what I've learned, is big trees that you let get as big as they want with some pruning annually. And you have to put them about 35 feet apart so that they can have plenty of room to stretch out. We don't have that kind of room here, and we want a lot of variety of fruit. What we've had to figure out is how do you do a lot of trees in a small space? And we have to cut back a pretty big amount every single year so that we can keep these small enough to be 10 feet apart. So we have 4 rows. Eventually they'll be completely filled in. We haven't gotten all those fruit trees yet. 4 rows, the trees are 10 feet apart. In between is 12 feet, and then we do have a center aisle that's 23 feet wide there. In my imagination, we have like a garden party or a tea party or a luncheon or something in the middle of all the trees when they're blooming. I don't know. I have to have these visions for the future so that I can keep going and be excited about all the work that it takes to get there. Pretty cool. I'll show you real quick what happens to a tree that's never pruned and why you definitely want to keep one pruned. And you can see the fruit right there. Look at that. There's a nice big one. These will be ready around September. And what we didn't know last year is that you have to pick them before they're ripe, and they have to ripen off the tree. How are we going to take the fruit off the trees if we can't reach them? So that's part of the lesson of pruning, is it doesn't make sense to have a fruit tree where you can't use the fruit. We have to figure out how to make our trees work for us, not us work for our trees. So we're gonna get some in September. We also are gonna be pruning back our new trees so that this does not happen. This is the other example of what happens when you don't prune your trees. When we got here, it was positively dripping with peaches. We ate the peaches, they were delicious. But in a storm, it completely broke. Now, Donnie, this is not what you're supposed to do with a fruit tree. You're supposed to remove damaged limbs, but we thought this was really cool because it was an example of being grafted back onto the vine and being able to produce fruit after something, some damage happened. And so we think that that's a really a poignant lesson also in just Christian ministry, the Christian walk, is that it is actually possible to fall away and be grafted on back on here. But this tree did not produce fruit this year, so it's definitely got some healing to do. Lots of lessons in that, right? There was also another tree right there when we moved here, and during that same storm, there were so many peaches on it, so much fruit that had not been thinned, had never been pruned. The entire tree split in half, fell to the ground, and the roots were so weak that we just pulled it out of the ground. There was another one right over there that kind of did the same thing. It didn't produce any fruit, so we pulled that one out of the ground. So lots of lessons to be learned. We're gonna do our very best to grow an orchard that produces the right amount of fruit. This is a funny little area. It's a potato patch right now. Eventually, I would love to see a hoop house or a greenhouse go in right here, because this is the orchard. And we're not sure what we're gonna do with this dogwood tree. It's beautiful, but it's also got some disease. So this is the orchard. This is where we put the wide path. So the center aisle. I think it'd be so cool to have a beautiful greenhouse or hoop houses, which is just like a greenhouse but made of plastic, right here. But for now, this wonderful fertile soil used to be our brush pile. And instead of moving all the soil to my garden, I just bought a 50-pound bag of potatoes, potato seed for $5 out of season, and they're all growing. And now we come to what will eventually be my favorite place on this property, but it is also the place that currently looks the worst. We had some kids over last night, some teenagers who were interested in making disciples, and we were showing them some really cool, like, hands-on things with planting. And I didn't know we were going to be doing that. And so Donnie was like, everybody over to the garden. And I was like, oh no, it looks so bad. But we're in the cultivation process. So last year I put a bunch of cardboard down, which is really great for starting a new bed without digging into the current soil. The cardboard will smother the weeds, and it'll also ask the worms to come up and do their job of churning the soil. So you put cardboard down, you put compost on top of that, and then you can actually plant right then. So I did that in the fall. That's where we were able to plant some things this spring. And then I've continued to do that this year very slowly because there's so much else going on the property. So this is a very slow metamorphosis that's happening here. Ethan and I built this crazy looking archway. I actually love it. People who like straight lines are probably stressed out by it, but I love it. This will be the entrance to the garden. And then this will be about 60 feet wide, about 30 feet deep. And so we can plant a good amount of vegetables. We're gonna be putting up a barrier for the animals, which is another reason why this looks so bad. But the rabbits and the groundhogs and everything, even the birds, are just having their way with it. So we'll have a center aisle here, and then we'll have a cross aisle there, and then we'll just have little spaces to walk in between the beds. So it'll look, hopefully, completely different by the time I get to do this tour next year. But I guess I'll go ahead and tell you like what we are currently growing. I've already harvested potatoes. That was very fun. We have more potatoes to do. They're still growing. Back there I did garlic. Corn failing because of the shade. I didn't know these trees were going to be so big and full. One thing that has done really well, and it's about time to pull, are these potatoes. These are Purple Majesty potatoes. Let's see if we have any. Oh yeah, so fun. So there's the mother potato, and then all these little babies are the ones that were produced this year. Aren't they sweet? This is actually a really small variety of potato. Nice. Oh, there's another one. There's probably a couple more in there. Potatoes are so fun to grow. Over here we have just really the most important part of this vegetable garden, which is why I put the vegetable garden here in the first place, and this is asparagus. This was actually here when we moved here. I was touring the property with Donnie. We'd already put a contract on the house, but we'd never seen it. And I saw this from across the yard, completely filled with weeds all around it, and I said, oh my gosh, I think that is asparagus. And that was a big deal because I've always wanted to grow asparagus, but I've never felt grounded enough in a place, I never felt at home enough to plant asparagus because it takes several years to establish. So here it was, just kind of reassuring me that this was our new home. But it's shading other things. So next year it's probably going to go in this farthest east bed where we have the most shade, because when the asparagus is popping, there's no leaves on this tree. And this is where we have been able to serve our community almost since the day that we moved in. We built this little fire pit. We've been cutting down brush and trees and limbs, and there was actually some firewood already here. We got a few chairs, put some rocks around, and this has been where we've done worship, Bible study, and s'mores almost since the week that we moved in. I can't believe the rain held off. It's super humid, but it feels pretty nice. It's like 70, 76, I think, humidity of 68%. Which is higher than Houston today. So like, it's pretty humid here. But I just wanted to share how things have changed in the last year. If you'd like to know more about our ministry, you can go to likewiseministry.com. But today was just kind of about the place and what has changed. Thanks for watching with me. Hope to see you again here soon.